Hello and welcome to the Stronghold Digital Mining Daily Update. Today is Wednesday, February 21st, 2024. So in addition to variables that are specific to Stronghold Digital Mining, such as grid prices, such as hash prices, such as the status of a carbon capture initiative, right? In addition to those variables, another variable that invariably comes up over and over and over again is a number that's established by a group of very well-meaning, very intelligent, very caring people at the United States Federal Reserve. And that number that I'm referring to is the so-called interest rate, to keep it simple, right? And so today, the Fed minutes, basically just a bunch of notes from what was discussed at the January Federal Reserve meeting, were released, right? And it appears as if, though, there's some caution on the part of the U.S. Federal Reserve about lowering interest rates too quickly, and risk having inflation kind of flare back up again and become an issue. I'm simplifying it. What astonishes me and continues to astonish me is that higher inflation is somehow correlated with a belief that the U.S. Federal Reserve is going to fight increasingly harder in an effort to tame that inflation. I don't know how that's possible given the incredible budget deficits being run by the U.S. federal government, which invariably then the United States Federal Reserve has to kind of step in to help buy some of that debt, monetize some of that debt, one could argue. When you have all these other factors, right, that are I think stacking the chips, right, more and more to the side of saying, hey, you know what, to the extent the Fed can kind of do what it can to sort of try to at least keep inflation somewhat in check. I think otherwise it's kind of like, hey, inflation is just going to do what it's going to do. And I don't know that there's a political will nor just the numerical ability to raise rates even higher. Can rates go to 10%, 15%, 20%? You may think, hey, man, those are ridiculous sounding numbers. But once upon a time, if I'm not mistaken, in the early 1980s, the United States Federal Reserve actually jacked up interest rates to something close to 20%. Would today's marketplace, would today's U.S. economy, would today's world even be able to tolerate anything remotely close to 20% for even just a day or two or three, right? Let alone several months, if not several years. Listen, I'm not in the business of predicting what the United States Federal Reserve is going to do, okay? But I do think as shareholders of Stronghold Digital Mining, we kind of need to pay at least a tiny bit of attention to what this committee of very well-meaning individuals is attempting to do. And I think what they're attempting to do is to contain inflation, right? Not allow inflation to become a problem. I think the challenge for the United States Federal Reserve is that they're not getting a lot of help. They're not getting a lot of help from the U.S. federal government, an argument could be made, right? They're not getting a lot of help in a variety of other ways, and you have this one tool, right? Raise rates or lower rates. That's a very, very limited scalpel of sorts that I think is attempting to be used to just do things to the economy that I don't know are even possible to be done. So with all of that said, I did see that the price of Bitcoin took a little bit of a tumble, right? It's been kind of soft heading in to today's release of these minute notes. So we'll see what the price of Bitcoin subsequently does as the market digests this information. I see Bitcoin right now, as of the time this broadcast is being created, it's just under $51,000 a coin. Hash prices are just a little bit over 8 cents. Again, those numbers are great. Grid prices are incredibly soft. And I think that's because natural gas prices are just pretty much in the toilet, for lack of a more economically appropriate way of describing that, right? They're just not really doing so well. To the point, pardon me, where I think I even read that there's some concern among natural gas producers, these prices are so low. How is this going to affect our ability to continue producing this stuff? Again, that's a bit of a tangential topic, but it is super relevant in many ways to the potential for grid prices to either be a lot higher or a lot lower. Right now, both at PJM Penelec, which is the scrubgrass right portion of the grid, and PJM PPNL, I'm looking right now, grid prices are just over $10. That's pretty darn low. So, thankfully, as of right now, we have Bitcoin priced in dollars per megawatt hour over $100. So clearly, right, I got to believe, right, that everything that we've got is being devoted to mining Bitcoin, right? Or as much of what we've got as possible is being devoted to mining Bitcoin. I don't know what your thoughts are with regard to the Federal Reserve as to whether or not this quest to bring inflation back to 2%, if it's a doomed, sort of like adventure. Are we ever going to really do that? I mean, to me, the data, right, if you kind of look behind the scenes, it just seems as if though, like in the real world, right? Like, I mean, when you and I look at prices like on the shelves and just look at the prices we pay as part of everyday life, it's hard for me to say, wow, like inflation seems to really be under control, right? Especially when you start thinking about like auto insurance, if you think about homeowners insurance, if you think about all these other costs that oftentimes just don't get measured, which is bizarre as hell, right? Oftentimes even food and energy are excluded from any meaningful discussion regarding the inflation rate because it's presumed to be that both food and inflation are far too volatile. Well, in the world that you and I live in, we need to pay those costs, right? We need to pay energy costs. We need to pay food costs. So be that as it may, I'm optimistic that regardless of what happens, really, I don't know if the markets have figured this out yet. And I acknowledge it's very dangerous to try to outsmart the market, right? Because the market's going to do what it's going to do. But you would think, right, that at some point the market's got to be like, hey, wait a minute, if inflation isn't under control, hey, Bitcoin could very well be a suitable hedge against inflation. Likewise with gold. I know I mentioned gold not that long ago, right? This idea that, hey, if you want to hedge your purchasing power, hey, you'd like to believe that there are certain assets that will preserve that purchasing power. Gold and real estate within reason have arguably been historically some really good ways to do that. To the extent Bitcoin is going to finally live up, to its full potential as a replacement for gold, well, then it better start doing that as well, right? Whereby we see the price of Bitcoin advancing when we see that, hey, inflation is maybe not under control. But as of right now, it seems as if though everything seems to trade as a so-called tech equity, right? Hey, man, if rates come down, great. Everything goes to the races. If rates are going to stay higher for longer or potentially even go up, which I doubt is even possible, but to the extent the belief is, hey, rates can either stay the same or go up, it just seems as if though the market, generally speaking, at least up until now, has kind of been saying, well, we're just going to sell Bitcoin. We're going to sell gold. We're going to sell all these other assets, right, including the market as a whole, because we're concerned that rates will stay higher for longer or maybe even go up. We shall see. But as of right now, I like what I'm seeing insofar as some of our key input variables, especially hash prices. That's really important. Remember, regardless of the price of Bitcoin, okay, if hash prices are constructive, that's the bottom line. That's what we look for, right? We want hash prices to be constructive and good. And so right now at just over 8 cents, they're good, they're constructive. So I'll take it. Okay, my friend, let's stay positive, let's be great, and we'll see each other again tomorrow.